Good morning and welcome to Willow's Green Permaculture. Today I'm going to talk to you about how we identify key food forest species and make sure that they can grow well in the forest. What's especially great is when we can find little tiny new saplings of key food forest species that have started to grow because of the help of the different birds and squirrels and other animals that are here with us, deer as well. All of these animals help us build our food forests and help us plant the key species. So whether you got a small garden or a little backyard to take care of, I'm going to be showing you a lot of different species here today and how you can help them to grow. Just in the last couple minutes, I found some more. I found another pagoda dogwood. It's so exciting to find these trees, to find all of this life. So if this is something you're interested in, then let's get started. Fall is a great time to work on forestry and work on identifying the trees that you want to protect, that you want to make sure they can grow well, because they're so easy to identify. For example, we have here a sycamore tree. This is a tree that we planted in 2020. As you can see, it's doing really well and it has very, very distinctive leaves. And so in the fall is a really easy time to distinguish different trees because of all of their leaves. The winter is, of course, another time you can distinguish different trees easily using their bark, their buds, and so on. And in the fall, as the trees start to lose their leaves, you can also see the buds that they start to get ready for the following spring. Now, the thing is, this is a really important task for us because when we first moved here, this forest was dying. It was full of invasive buckthorn. The native trees that were here were almost all dead or dying because of some unnatural flooding that had been taking place for approximately 10 years. Now we've done many videos about this. We put the solutions in place, and so over the last 5 years, we've been planting a lot of trees, but more importantly, we have been looking for the trees that have been sprouting on their own because of the help of the different birds and squirrels and other animals that are here with us, deer as well. All of these animals help us build our food forests and help us plant the key species, sometimes even better than we do. They find the best places for them. This is an example of something that we planted ourselves, that I'm going to be going through the forest to show you different trees that we planted. But when I find different species that have started to grow, that are also important food forest species, that are either important because they will feed us and the animals, or they're simply important because they support the wildlife. And why is it important to support the native wildlife? There are many, many, many reasons. Obviously, a healthy biodiverse ecosystem with diverse plants, diverse animals, diverse fungi, and all of the rest of it, diverse insects, is very, very important. It's balanced. But also, what's also important is the food forest species that support the animals will do two things. First of all, they will keep the animals away from the gardens where we grow our food, but also they will attract these native animals, which will plant the key species that will also feed us. Many of the species that feed us, we didn't plant. It was the animals that planted them. I'm talking about black-cap raspberries, other types of raspberries, nannyberries, highbush cranberries, and wild grape, just to name a few. And so today, I'd like to show you some of the species that we discovered growing that are food forest species, or that are just simply very important species. And so let me give you a few examples of how easy it is to identify different trees. I got a whole bunch here, but as we go through the forest and I show you how we're going to be doing this, I'll show you a whole bunch others. So here we have, for example, some highbush cranberry leaves. Really, really beautiful. Here we have some hazelnut leaves. Maple, of course, very familiar. Lots and lots of maple. which is great. We're starting, we didn't have any maple when we first came here, almost none, and now we have a whole bunch. Of course, this is a sycamore leaf that looks very much like maple. Not quite the same though, but they look very, very similar. We have one of my favorite wildflowers is Virgin's Bower. Virginia-Clematis is what it's called in French and in Latin. Clématite de Virginie, because it's a type of clematis. It's very, very beautiful climbing plant. We also have here's one of the new species that we've found all over the place this year, and I've noticed now that it started growing. Some of them started growing last year and maybe even 2 years ago. This is just one of a part of a composite leaf of Bitternut Hickory. I love Bitternut Hickory, and I've discovered a whole bunch of it, probably about 20 of them growing, and I'll show you that in a little while. Here's some more high bush cranberry leaves. This is either some gooseberry or some wild currant. I'm not sure which one. Of course, the pawpaws that we have planted, but I've started to find pawpaw volunteers, and that's what I mean about the animals helping. I winter sowed a whole bunch of pawpaws this past January. So January, 9 months ago, I direct sowed them outside. So the squirrels decided to change the location of some of those seeds that I direct sowed, and I've discovered where they were growing. And so that was really nice, because the squirrels will find the right spot to plant certain things sometimes. Of course, oak is another one. And then here are, like the sycamore above me here, and we've got some more leaves, sycamore leaves here. Like the sycamore, another one that we've planted ourselves are tulip trees. So here are some leaves of tulip trees. So just to underline how easy it is to identify trees. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go through the forest, and I'm going to show you what we do for the trees that we discover growing. And so what I've got here is, obviously I've got some shears. I've got some hand shears, very small. I've got a sickle. I don't think I'm going to be using a sickle today. I use sickle to basically cut grass or herbaceous plants if there are a whole bunch of them. But where we're working, it's going to be mostly, let's say, woody plants that I'll be cutting. And so it'll be much easier to use either a hand shear or a ratchet shear. That's what I'm going to be using today. And I've got some stakes that are painted. They're probably not the most beautiful thing to identify something with, but if you look around, sometimes it can be hard in, let's say, the winter, spring, and summer to identify, let's say, trees just by looking at the forest, because all the colors are very, very similar in those other 3 seasons. And so we need something that's going to stand out. And this might not be the prettiest. Maybe I should have used a nice mustard yellow paint or something like that to imitate a little bit better nature. But I used this red paint because it's what I had used initially to spray all of my tools so I don't lose them. Although I keep losing them because I haven't sprayed all of them. So now I'm going to show you some of the trees that we've been looking for. So come with me. So here's one. Actually, this is another way I use to identify the trees, is using tree guards, because tree guards are pretty easy to see. But I don't have that many tree guards. I've used them all up, and I have dozens and dozens and dozens more trees that I want to protect and make sure they're visible. So this here is a Bitternut Hickory. Now, if you come very close and have a look at the buds, they are a mustard yellow, or a sulfur yellow, what's called. And so that's one of the easy ways. You can see a couple buds here, and you can see a bud here, the end bud. They've got composite leaves, and now some of them have fallen, obviously. I think they have about maybe 5 leaves in each composite leaf. But these make a little tiny, let's say about this big, a walnut type nut that's really quite nice. There's the Bitternut Hickory. We also have shagbark hickory. Let's go on and I'll show you the next trees. here, this is a silver maple. Now actually this is a tree that we've planted, and the first couple of years the deer ate it. Actually this is backwards, I'm going to put it so it's more visible. The deer ate it down quite a bit. Sometimes it completely disappeared with all of the vegetation around it. And so, because we actually planted this in 2020, so it hasn't grown a whole lot. It keeps getting eaten down by the deer. But I've got a few things to say about that. Once again, I don't mind that it gets eaten down by the deer, because I'm supporting native wildlife. And this is far away from the garden, so I'd rather the deer eat this than the food in my garden. Especially because the food in my garden, it's herbaceous, and if they eat it all, it's all gone. Whereas when they browse on a native plant like this silver maple, they depend on these plants. They're not going to eat it down to the ground. Normally, anyways. They're just going to eat enough to have enough to eat, let's say, and then they're going to look elsewhere, but they're not going to want to kill it. Instinctively, they're not going to want to kill this tree because they need it. So it's always going to come back. So if you plant something and it gets eaten down by animals, don't worry, it will come back. Now, I know I've had many comments from people who've said, oh, I've had animals and they've eaten everything right down to the ground. And it didn't come back because they just kept eating it right down to the ground, right down to the ground, right down to the ground. Well, what that's an indication of is an imbalance in the ecosystem. It means that there's work that needs to be done, maybe not just where you are, but in the whole community, to work on making spaces for wild animals. Because whenever you got a problem like that, it's because there's an imbalance. So that's why here, when we came here and we saw the dying forest, what there was an imbalance. This was a forest that had been unnaturally flooded for 10 years, that had had bush hogs cut it all the way down to the ground, I don't know how many times. A bush hog is a piece of machinery that takes out all manner of vegetation with trunks up to a diameter of a few inches wide and takes it all out in the same way that a lawnmower cuts grass. It's very destructive. This is what the area where I'm standing right now looked like mostly when we moved here. And so what it had, it was this plant here, mostly, this one, invasive buckthorn. Once again, in the fall, it's really easy to identify this plant because it's one of the last trees to hold on to its leaves while still green. This is a plant that I've been cutting out of the forest for 5 years. I don't dig it out, so it keeps coming, but that's fine because slowly the native trees will take over. So what we did, we had a forest that had a huge ecological imbalance in it. And so we started simply by planting the flowers and the trees and the shrubs that would attract the animals back to this place. And then the animals started working with us by planting more of those flowers, those trees, those shrubs, those fruit that would attract more animals. And then I, of course, began to take out the invasive species. And with the help of Magali, both of us, we worked on improving the forest and in solving the unnatural flooding problems. There are lots of videos about those. I'm not going to talk about that now. And so as the animals came back, we started to see species growing. And we started to see the forest come back to health. And now it's been 5.5 years and the forest is really healthy. It's full of, where I'm kneeling right now, there was basically nothing. And you could see 50 meters or 50 yards that way easily, and in all directions. And now you can't. And so what I do every fall and every winter is I look for those new plants, those new trees that have been planted by the animals or that have been planted by the birds or by the wind or in whichever way. I look for those and then I will trim around them to make sure they can grow well. And so that's what I'm gonna be showing you in a few minutes. This area has already mostly been trimmed. I would like to trim back this one buckthorn here. This area has, as you can see, it's pretty cleared out. But this buckthorn is pretty close to the maple, so I want to make sure I take that out. It's not the best example to show you how to identify it. I've got other examples. But once again, when almost all the leaves in the whole forest are gone, you'll still see these trees with their leaves. So they're really easy to find at the end of fall. Let's continue. This here is one of the trees that I planted in 2020. One of the Carolinian Zone species of trees. Now we're actually just north of the northern edge of the Carolinian Zone. The northern edge, it goes from, let's say, the Carolinas all the way up to its northern edge, which is around, let's say, Toronto and so on. But with climate change, those edges are changing. And we are in the forests of the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence. But the animals and the wildlife of the Carolinian Zone are coming here and are staying here for a longer time. And so I've been wanting to help them out by putting in Carolinian species. The sycamore I showed you was an example. Here's another one. And what I'd like to show you about this tree right here, let's look at these leaves here. First I'm gonna show one that's almost lost all its leaves. If we look at this here, I'm just gonna clip this off if it comes. No, it doesn't want to come off. Okay, so I'm not gonna pull it off. This has lost all its leaves almost, except for these at the end. But if you look here, this is the stem. This is the branch stem, the leaf, the tree stem. This here is the leaf stem. Look at how big. This is a single, what's called composite leaf. Composite leaves, if you look over here, are leaves that have several mini leaves, leaflets, let's say. Okay? And so I haven't even named the tree for you yet. This is a Kentucky coffee tree. And the Kentucky coffee tree has these composite leaves that are composite in two ways. They have little branchlets, and then they have all the many leaflets on each branchlet. So if you look here, you can see all these little leaves. But if you look at some of the complete ones up above here, so if you look above, like at this one, for instance, it's lost some of its leaves. But this whole section here that I'm gonna pass over with my hand, this whole section right here, this is a single leaf. And so a single composite leaf. So the Kentucky coffee tree is the tree with the biggest composite leaf in all of North America. So you could say the biggest leaf in North America because this is bigger than any single leaf. The sycamore I showed you, that's got a pretty big leaf on it. And this is much bigger. This one leaf is much bigger than the sycamore leaf. But it's what's called a composite one. You can see more up there. So I'm really happy about this Kentucky coffee tree because I planted it in 2020 and it's getting quite big. I've got two others on the land here that I've planted, but I can't wait till we get our first pod so that I can plant the seeds that we're growing here and plant a whole lot more. So this year, what I'm really focusing on for identifying and clearing around them are oak, maple, and bitternut hickory. In our first couple of years, I really focused on Nannyberry because I saw a whole bunch of them growing and they were being strangled out by the buckthorn. That was the first couple of years. Here's the fruit of a Nannyberry. It tastes like prunes. Really nice. They have a little pit. And I'll just throw these pits on the ground. Let them grow in the place. Here's the Nannyberry tree. I just got it from. They have very distinctive buds. Right there, see that? Kind of pinkish. Really nice. In my first year here in the winter of 2020, January 2020, I cleared around hundreds of nannyberries that were just no bigger than, let's say, something like this. Even half the size of this. Cleared out, and now look at them. They're big. And then over the years, I've concentrated on different types of trees. But this year, it's going to be oak, maple, and bitternut hickory, and also walnut. I also want to protect a lot of the walnut that's been growing. I've been ignoring the walnut, but this year I want to protect it because the walnut can feed us as well. I've learned different ways of how I can access that difficult to open walnut, and I can tell you about that in a different video. So this is one of the first oaks that I discovered growing back in let's say January 2020. It was just tiny. So it's actually, and so I've been protecting it every year, but it's been browsed on, as you can see, by the animals in the past. But this is the first year that I have put this tree guard on it, and I've also put this post beside it. Because the thing is, sometimes I will not see some of these trees, and I'll be clearing around something else, and I'll cut it by accident, and I don't want to do that anymore. Let's go on to the next tree. Now I'm about to get into some of the work that we do to clear around these trees, but before, I'd like to show you a few of the other Carolinian species that we've added in here. This is a medicinal tree called witch hazel, Hamamelis virginiana, and what's really distinctive about this tree are its blooms. It's October 20th, I think, today, or maybe the 21st, and these blooms have just opened. They open in the late fall. You know, we're a full month after the fall equinox, and so they're very impressive. So this is one way to identify this tree, with these very different looking flowers. And so this is one that we put in. It was in 2021. And then here we have a couple. These are the only pawpaws that I purchased back in 2020. They were tiny. The stem was probably this big. It was probably not even this big, with a bare root attached to it. Back in 2020, I got it in the mail. It was didn't look too healthy. And so this is now 5.5 years later. I'm hoping maybe this will at least flower next year, this pawpaw. And here's another one. However, I've got a whole playlist of pawpaw videos because I plant them. I plant them, I sow them, I buy fruit, I eat the fruit, I sow the trees, and I sow them in different places. But I can talk about that at length in different videos. But these are about the only ones that I actually purchased and didn't plant from seed. And the next one is over here. This is a Spicebush. Love this tree. And what's really interesting about it is how easily you could see the buds this time of year. We got a few fruit on it this year. This is another one that we, along with the pawpaws, we planted this in 2020. And it's doing really, really nicely. You can use the leaves and the fruit as spice in the kitchen. Another Carolinian species. I was looking for an example of an oak that I'd put a little stone beside, which was the first way that I identified my trees. But as I looked, I just found this one. This is one I just found just right now. Look at this beautiful oak. I don't know exactly what type of oak it is. I think this is a swamp oak from the shape of its leaves. And we do live on a piece of land that has a lot of moisture, and so that would make sense. It's low-lying. This could very well be a swamp oak. Just found it. Now, in the first couple of years when I started doing this, what I used was, if you can come in closer, you can see, here's one of the first oaks that I found. And I identified it using a stone. So here's the stone. It's very difficult to see, but here it is. And so this wasn't the most effective way of identifying the trees. I figured I'd put this blue twine around it that I was just reusing because it was what our straw bales came wrapped in. And so I'd take the twine off and reuse it for different things. And I thought, well, this is very visible. It'll be easy to see. But, you know, the stone on the ground, the color of the stone just blends right into nature and eventually gets covered by fallen leaves, whether it's in the fall or any other season. So it wasn't the most effective. And so obviously tree guards are effective, or these painted stakes are effective. And maybe I'll just change the color, or if any of you have a really clever idea of what I can use to identify trees in a pretty way that I can use recycled materials with, that would be really nice. Now, one reason why I stopped here is because we got 3 out of the 4 examples of the trees that I'm concentrating on identifying over the next week or two, or since last week and over the next couple of weeks, to protect. We've got the oak right here. This could also be this I believe might be another type of swamp oak. It also looks like it could be a white oak, although usually white oak have rounded edges and not pointy edges. So we have oak. Over here we have one of the many bitternut hickories that I found. You can see once again that these mustard colored buds. And then on the other side of the oak over here, you don't really see many of the leaves, but here's a maple, which at one point was completely bent over from the buckthorn surrounding it. And it had also been either broken or browsed upon, or maybe I even cut it, as you can see down here. Now, you might be wondering, these 3 trees that I'm protecting are all very, very close together. Got the maple, the oak, and the bitternut hickory. Well, for now, they're small. And so I'd just like to let them continue to grow together like that. Maybe at one point, I'm going to want to make a decision to decide which one to keep, because obviously trees need a lot of space. However, in the wild, they grow close together and they adapt to each other's presence. And so in the end, what happens is you'll have 2 or 3 trees growing real close together, and from afar, they'll almost look like one tree with different leaves, let's say. But as you get close up, you can see that they're different trees. You see the bases of their trunks. But often they'll just wrap around each other. And that's a completely natural way of growing as well. And so I'd like to keep as many as possible. Others are isolated, and so they will have all the space they need. Obviously, some trees, they're beautiful just because of their shape, and if they have all the space they need, then they can have that shape. But in other times, they can be mixed like this, and that's good too. Here's another one of the Carolinian Zone trees that we planted. This is a tulip tree. This was actually the small one of the 2 that we planted. The bigger one is just over here. But this one got broken by a falling tree, a falling dead tree that we had to cut down. And we tried our best to avoid it, but there were so many different things to avoid. It was a branch far from the trunk that broke this tree. But as you can see, this was this past January, February that this happened. And as you can see, it's got a lot of branches growing. There's this one here, all of these ones. And so in January, I'm going to choose one of these branches to make this into a new tulip tree that can grow. But as you can see, this thing is full of life. And look at the size of the leaves. Some of them were 2 or 3 times bigger than this year. That's what happens when you've got a tree that breaks and and it's got a healthy root system, it will put out a lot of branches with huge giant leaves to collect as much energy as it can to start to regrow. Because if you look, this is more a typical size of the leaf right here, and so you can compare the two sizes right there. But I found some leaves in the summer that were maybe even bigger than that, almost twice as big. Here's another type of tree that we're protecting, that we're encouraging to grow. This is a mountain ash tree. It gives a really nice orange bunch of fruits in the summertime, and sometimes it'll hold on to it, onto the fruit through the winter. This one doesn't have any right now. We've got a few of these throughout the land here. A mountain ash tree. And then right beside it, we have a prickly ash tree. These trees I love, and I'm going to show you a different example in a minute. These are little ones. We have lots and lots and lots of these trees. So if they're surrounding other plants that I'm trying to protect, I'll take them down because we have so many. However, I like to leave a lot of them because these give a nice tiny little red fruit that's also known as Szechuan spice, because this tree's cousin grows in China. This one here, the prickly ash, is native to the Carolinian Zone and also to the forests of the Great Lakes in St. Lawrence. The little fruit, you taste that fruit, it's got a bit of a spicy flavor and it numbs your tongue. It's really, really interesting. I really like it. What's really interesting about this tree is that it is in the citrus family, the Rutaceae family, the only tree that grows native in the wild in Canada that's in the citrus family. It can be worked into a type of a bonsai. Now this one, it's got a broken branch. It used to have a branch coming out this way, but this branch broke from a falling tree. But this one I've been kind of working on making it into a type of a bonsai shape. They're really, really pretty trees. And when the fruit are there, the bright red in contrast with the deep green of the leaves, it's really quite nice. Here we have a catalpa tree. Now this one actually I discovered last fall growing in our orchard, and so it was about maybe this tall, and I transplanted it last fall because it couldn't stay in the orchard. It would, because it would eventually have given 100% shade to the entire orchard. So I transplanted it. It's the only catalpa that I've noticed growing here so far, and so I transplanted it into the heart of the forest here. And as you can see, it grew quite well through the summer, through the spring and summer, even though we had a drought this year. And you know, I transplanted this last fall and then put these stakes up. Didn't paint them, I just painted these yesterday, but I put these stakes up when I transplanted it last fall and then forgot about it. And then I just noticed it a couple days ago when I painted these, and I said, oh, it did well. Well, that's the thing about native species. You don't have to baby native species. Even if they're surrounded by other stuff, you try and give them the space they need, but really they'll find their way. Not only are native species obviously important because they support the native wildlife, they support a healthy, balanced, biodiverse ecosystem, but also they save you a lot of work because you can just put them in and let them take care of themselves. Here's another native species that I like to encourage growing everywhere. We've got about 1/3 of a chest freezer full of wild grapes that we picked here from the forest. And when we first came here, we didn't have any wild grapes. And now we have a ton of them. And they're so delicious. This is the time of year that obviously in late fall, they start to get sweet. You know, after you've had a few frosts, that's when the fruit sweetens. And depending on where you are, this fruit could be ready in early September, right up until late November. Really, really nice. A lot smaller than cultivated grapes, but really, really nice. Acid, very healthy. The juice of this is really, we press the juice out. It's so good. But I'm going to be doing a whole video on grapes, so I'm not going to say any more than that. Now, the funny thing is this grapevine has lost all of its leaves. It's very important to identify it correctly because there are other plants. For instance, there's one that's called Virginia creeper. You can't eat the berries off of that. And some people confuse Virginia creeper with grapevine. But the leaves are totally different. I don't have examples to show you. But the funny thing is this grapevine is intertwined with a virgin's bower vine. Now the virgin's bower doesn't actually give any fruit, but it does give a really, really nice flower. So this fruit is not coming off of this vine. Here's another plant that's a bit all over the forest, and I'm going to start identifying it as well to give it a bit more space, just so I can get some more fruit from it. This is either a gooseberry or a wild currant. A wild gooseberry or wild currant. I'm not sure which. I'm not as good at distinguishing those two types of species because I'm pretty sure they both have the same type of leaf. But it's either a wild gooseberry or wild currant. One way or another it's a wild fruit that's really delicious. And here we got some buckthorn growing through it, so I'm just going to take that out. We've got some buckthorn growing right beside it, so I'm going to take that out. And actually, here's another thing I'd like to show you. So behind this gooseberry or this currant, here's another buckthorn, a couple of them. As you can see, there are the leaves I was telling you about, that it keeps late into the fall. In the wintertime, another thing you can use to identify it are its thorns. As you can see, coming out at perpendicular angles to the trunk. And ouch, these are really, really sharp. And in fact, when I'm working with this stuff, I'm wearing my safety glasses, which I'll show you in a minute, because I wouldn't want to get one of these thorns in my eye. They're quite something. So these are my safety glasses that I use for different jobs where you need to protect your eyes, and one of those is doing forestry with especially when you're around thorny bushes. And what's good about these is they're also prescription, because I use reading glasses. So for looking at small things close up in wintertime, these glasses help me identify trees if the buds are too small for me to be able to distinguish them, without them. Because some buds are pretty tiny. Others are really easy to see without the glasses, but some no. Now, but another thing I'd like to show you is sometimes there are plants that aren't necessarily like the buckthorn, which is a non-native invasive, and it really strangles the other trees around it. But then there are other trees that are really, really abundant and that I like a lot, but we have so many of them, and if they're shading out a tree that we want to protect, then I'll cut them down a bit. And this is an example here. We've got some different types of dogwood here. What I will do is, I've got one type of dogwood here and another type of dogwood here. And dogwoods are shrubs, and so they put out branches easily. Just to give this currant or gooseberry a bit more sunlight, I'm just going to cut a few of these top branches off. And it's just going to grow more branches at its base. Not going to kill the tree. I'll do this especially if I've got a tree maybe about this high and I want to have more space out here. But I'm just cutting some of these branches, letting the rest stay, and it's just gonna, if you cut it like that, it's just gonna grow more branches from below. But now I've given this a little bit more sunlight, and we're still gonna have all that dogwood. And then what I do here is I'll just take these branches and put them right down on the ground so they can help build the soil. We're always trying to build the soil. Okay. Here we've got a high bush cranberry sapling. I can see the buds here. That's what really helps me identify it, but also the shape of the leaves. And it's right beside another gooseberry or currant bush. Now, this one is surrounded by dogwood, which I'm just gonna cut the tops off of, because eventually this high bush cranberry will be taller than this dogwood. And so the dogwood will be growing underneath it. And of course, there's buckthorn right here. So I'm going to get rid of that. Often when I'm cutting trees, they'll also be attached to grapevine or different vines. And because we have so much grapevine now, I can cut some of those. Once again, I just put that on the ground. Now also, if you notice, right above this high bush cranberry, right here, right above me, there's a trembling aspen, which is in the poplar family. Trembling aspen doesn't give a heavy shade, and so the high bush cranberry will be able to very, very easily live in conjunction with this trembling aspen. It will grow up to, this will grow up to about 4 meters tall, so about maybe 15 feet tall, almost. And so I'm just going to trim some of these branches here to give this high bush cranberry a little bit more sunlight in the summertime. More dogwood here. And when I notice that the trembling aspen branches, the lower ones are maybe getting in the way, I might start to cut them. But for now, they're fine. For now, this tree's going to get plenty of sun. So in here, we've got a couple maple trees. They're pretty close together. I might eventually want to make a decision of which one I'll want to have grow. But I'm going to have to clear out. There's a whole bunch of buckthorn in there that I'm going to start clearing out. And then over here on the other side, we've got a high bush cranberry. And there's a lot of buckthorn that I'm going to clear out here. So I'm going to start clearing this out. Now, while I'm clearing this out, I'm going to talk about something else. One tree that grows a lot here, and I'll show it to you, I will, is the ash tree. I've shown you prickly ash, I've shown you mountain ash, but there's also ash, straight ash, the one that's been affected by the emerald ash borer. We've had a lot of dead trees here due to the emerald ash borer. Actually, here's one right here. Here's an ash tree. I can tell from its bud here that this is an ash. Now, the ash easily grows lots and lots and lots of saplings. And so I can easily cut out a lot of these ash saplings and still have a lot of ash trees in the forest. And I'd rather not let the majority of them grow, because after about 10 years or maybe 15, they're likely going to get killed by the emerald ash borer, and then we're going to have a big tree that we're going to have to cut down, which I suppose would be fine for firewood and stuff like that. But if I have to choose between an ash tree and a maple, or between an ash tree and an oak, or between an ash tree and a high bush cranberry, or whatever, any of those other important species, then unfortunately I'm probably going to take the ash tree out. And so I'm going to take this sapling out to give more space, for example, to this high bush cranberry. Now there's all sorts of stuff I need to take out here. And so I'm just going to start taking it all out. Now here's an example of one of the ash trees that we had that died. Right here you can see the stump. Now the thing about the emerald ash borer is it bores into the bark and then eats the live part of the bark, which is just under the bark. It eats that away, and that's what kills the top of the tree. It basically kills from a portion of the trunk right up all the way to the top, and it kills the whole thing. But the roots, of course, are still alive. And so when we cut these, it of course shot up a whole bunch of shoots. And in some cases when we've done this, we've chosen one of the shoots and we've let it grow. But we don't always do that, but you can see them right here. Here's one, here's another shoot right here, here's another one right here, and if I recall, this I think we didn't cut this past January, but maybe January like a year and a half ago. So you can see how quickly all of this stuff has grown back. This is basically 2 summers of growth. Now, but this ash is right beside these maples, and I'd rather have these maples grow right here. And so I'm going to be taking these ash out in order to allow the maples to grow. And because the trunk is pretty thick, it's too thick for the little hand shear, and so I'm just going to take it out like this. Make sure I don't crush my maple tree as I'm taking it out. I need to sharpen these shears a little. I wouldn't want to use these to cut healthy branches off the trees because it's best to do a clean cut. This trunk, I can either lay it down and just have it use it to build the soil, or I can use it on a chinampa or in a hugelkultur mound, or I can cut all these side branches off and use it as a stake in the garden, or for making a teepee to grow beans and stuff like that. So everything is always used. Everything, nothing gets wasted. And we're thankful for all the life that we have here and for everything that we have to cut as well. Even for the buckthorn, we're thankful for all that energy that we have. We have a great respect for everything that's here, everything that's growing here, and even all the stuff that we cut out. It's just as important as everything else, and it gets basically, its life energy continues in the forest, continues to feed the whole ecosystem, and so we're really happy about that. So now I'm going to just continue clearing around all these trees. And just before we finish up, I haven't shown you any walnuts yet, but we have walnut trees everywhere, and I want to start letting them grow. I want to, I want to start, clearing around them so they can grow, because they're a beautiful, beautiful tree. And like I said, I've learned how to crack a wild walnut. They're hard to crack, but I've learned how to crack them so I can eat them, but that's coming up in another video. Actually, right behind me here is another tree that I've been looking through the forest to find. It's a type of dogwood, but a special one called pagoda dogwood. I like it because of the shape of the tree. You don't really notice it right now. Let me show you. But if you look at the branches, you see how they have these wavy patterns on them. And when these are full of leaves, and the leaves are nice and shapely as well, it's quite beautiful. And they end up being like these flat branches with their leaves. And the way the tree is structured, it really is structured like a pagoda. It's really, really nice. And here I'd like to finish off with another one of our oak trees that one of the first ones that I found in 2020 growing, and that was browsed on a few times since then, but it's coming along. It's coming along well. And another one right above it is a basswood. The leaves are edible on these things. This was another one which was just this tiny sapling in 2020, and look at that now. Anyway, just about to finish up. But after the conclusion, after the goodbye and thank you and all the rest of it, I'm probably going to show you some B-roll, and where I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to show you some of the other trees that we've been looking for and that we've been finding. And I just in the last couple minutes, I found some more. I found another pagoda dogwood. I found another bitternut hickory that's taller than I am. It's just wonderful. It's so exciting to find these trees. It's just so exciting to find all of this life. And I really, really love that. I hope you liked the video. Hope you learned something from it and you found it useful. If you enjoyed it, then please give it the thumbs up and please share it with your friends. Don't forget to leave a comment or ask a question. I love to answer your questions and respond to your comments. Another thing you can do to help us out is you can hype the video. I'm not sure, but I think maybe you can only do that on a phone, but I'm not sure about that. And if you haven't done so yet, then subscribe to our channel. Support what we do here just by subscribing. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for watching the video and for sharing all of this wonderful knowledge with us. And also for sharing your knowledge through your comments and questions and so on. Have a wonderful week, and we will see you next time.